Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Ukrainian Spaces as we are nearing our season two finale with at the end of this year. It's going to be this and next one episode before we are going on a mid-season break and relaunch Ukrainian Spaces for season three already this February. But you'll have to stick around and we'll have much more news about what season three is going to be about and how it look like. But
Yep.
for now, let's drive it to the finish line with this season. Hello, Valeria.
Hey, I'm not going to ask you how you are because we've been talking a bit this week, and I think this week has highlighted for many people, that we're in a very different position from where we were last year, particularly in terms of what we're doing over these holidays. And so I know it's been tough for a lot of people. Just wanted to acknowledge that before we start. And it's been, tough for a lot of people who have been here and who we're close to as well. So it's pretty personal these days, but yeah.
But you know what? I think a lot of people are also not sure how to behave around Ukrainians these holidays. And for example, I saw people wouldn't just send any messages to Ukrainians to congratulate them with holidays because they don't know how to be in this situation and whether it's even appropriate. And I don't know, I'm not speaking on behalf of all Ukrainians, right? This season is very tough mentally for sure, especially because I personally haven't seen my family for almost a year. But what I can say that it's better still to reach out to Ukrainians, and it's better still to show them that you think of them, you care for them, your friends or people you know, because this season kind of gets a more isolation feeling to most of us, just exactly because of this reason. So the best
Yeah.
course of action is always reach out. Even if you don't know what to say, just say to them that you think about them and you wish with all your heart that Ukraine gets our victory soon. I think that would
Yeah.
be the best.
And it's been pretty great as well and amazing to see what people in Ukraine have been doing. I don't know if many of you know, but I believe Ukrainians voted as well to be able to celebrate Christmas on 24th, 25th, whenever that is, as well as later in January. And it was just so amazing to see that, despite a lot of struggles back home in Ukraine, they still took the time out a little bit to celebrate together with the people that were close to them. So it's just, as always, Ukraine coming through and showing resilience in a lot of ways, even in times like this.
Absolutely. But one, I think, important thing to acknowledge before we're going to introduce our featured Ukrainian this week is that unfortunately Russian terrorism does not have any holiday breaks. And through even Christmas Eve and today, there are bombings and shellings and all kind of terror that Russians are waging against Ukrainians hasn't stopped. And I saw online these days, because there was a terrible tragedy in Kherson on Christmas Eve, and people were very shocked to discover that Russians would kill Ukrainian civilians even during holiday break. But I really encourage people to just look into history of Russian colonialism more, because I shared a story today that still kind of haunts me, especially these days, about the siege of Grozny in Chechnya that happened exactly on December 31st, on New Year's Eve, because Russians planned to maximize the civilian casualties because they knew that people would be at home with their families. They will try to celebrate or will try to have a holiday break. And that's when they specifically attacked all those civilians because they wanted to make the victims count as high as possible. So yeah, through the years, the Russians can change their regimes, they can change their rulers, but these murderous tactics of Russian colonialism do not change. So just educate yourself, folks.
Yeah, which is why we can now move on to the solution to, countering a lot of what we've been talking about with Maksym, including Russian colonialism, which is to elevate Ukrainian voices, which is what we've been doing here for I don't even know how many months now, over 9 months, 10 months, I believe. Um, and so, as you all know, what we do here is we give an opportunity to Ukrainians to talk about their areas of expertise and explain Ukraine through their own personal lenses to the rest of the world. And so, our golden rule is always to ask our featured Ukrainians to introduce themselves the way that they see fit, the way that they see comfortable. So, I'd like to ask Mark, who's joining us today, to introduce himself to everyone else.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Mark Kaplan. Currently, I'm hosting the Ukrainian version of the English version of Ukrainian YouTube, Ukrainian Toronto television, which is kind of a late show, Ukrainian YouTube late show format. If you haven't seen it, and we're doing the English version of it because we felt like there's a lot of stupid and funny conspiracy around Ukraine out there, and there should be something to do to counter it. And there wasn't enough in YouTube of such content, so we decided to do it ourselves. Not that successful yet. We're having like 15,000 followers right now, but still hoping for more attention to the problems and more listeners. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it and share it. I personally have the international relations background. I studied in Poland and then in Paris. I did a lot of studies on first Israel-Palestinian conflict and then on the U.S. politics. I had the personal blog on U.S. politics since 2016, I think. I did some political consultancy in Ukraine. I worked for one of the Ukrainian MPs. Even did one political election campaign, and here I am. Thank you for having me.
I think I wanted to start by also asking you in what way all this work that you've been doing in the last 10 months is personal for you. Because, of course, every Ukrainian these days is trying to do something for the country, for our survival, for making sure that we all together go through this genocide and all survive and get our victory. But for each and every one Ukrainian we invite to Ukrainian spaces, they always share something that makes it extra personal for them, this fight. So with all your work in recent 10 months, is there something you feel like has been driving you every day extra to make it done, no matter what, no matter how bad day, what kind of a bad day you have?
Well, it's hard to do anything on bad days, but anger, first of all, like the anger you feel each time you see some wrong takes on Ukraine, some Russian propaganda in Western media, etc. But I wanted to say that, it's everyone is doing their part, but probably I'm not in the front line, and the thing I do is not that significant as people who do it on the front lines. But it makes me feel a little bit better about myself when I do at least something for it. And I think you can tell this about every Ukrainian right now. Everyone is doing something to feel better, to participate in this common victory, which I hope will be in the future.
I know we spoke briefly earlier, but I know you've been doing a lot of work and a lot of research around the influences of far right on a lot of the narratives that have been going around about Ukraine, and also how those narratives then are potentially dangerous and can translate into, real life events and activities. And I know it's an extremely broad question to go straight in with, but I just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing in that respect, and any interesting things that you found that maybe other people don't know.
We definitely have a problem because it is influencing what's happening For instance, if you take the last elections in the United States, they could have been slightly more about Ukraine, and instead the Republican opposition to assistance to Ukraine rose. It's the opposition is like around 50%, I guess, from the last polls before the elections. And Democrats who could do this, the topic of their campaign, the helping Ukraine, they did not push it hard. They silenced the topic, and therefore Ukraine wasn't in the media at all, and therefore there was less incentive to help Ukraine, to send Ukraine some weapons for it to succeed, to do some more successes on the battlefield, etc., which translated to probably more Ukrainian deaths. And if you look at what's going on there on the right in the United States, in GOP and probably on the far right, it's really dangerous. It affects the assistance already now. It affects what we're talking about. It affects what Americans are talking about, and it's a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think also as a fellow journalist, and I've been dealing with the disinformation for so long, but there's one question that I never kind of I never can get a straight answer even for myself, like why it is still important to pay attention to all these conspiracies and disinformation about Ukraine, because one thing is obvious, that all that stuff is extremely bizarre, and sometimes you look and you think it's definitely not possible that people will take it seriously, right? And then yet it makes an impact, and people do replicate it, and people do talk about it. Like, for example, all this nonsense about all Ukrainians being Nazis and stuff like that. So why do you think that people still react to the most bizarre and the most ridiculously idiotic examples of Ukraine conspiracies? And maybe you can also, share a couple of examples of your really, really favorite, the most bizarre stuff that still travels and still sticks around.
This far right movement, or those ideas, and far left as well. Far left is also part of a problem. This idea is built on being a contrarian, so to oppose everything mainstream. And if the mainstream thing is opposing a genocide, or this mainstream thing is to support Ukrainians, then it is right thing to do for a contrarian to oppose it. Because otherwise, if Biden helps Ukraine, and Ukraine actually wins in the end, then it means that Biden, being like center left or whatever, was right and was doing a good thing. I couldn't imagine, I don't know, people like Ben Shapiro or Tucker Carlson acknowledge this. So, and in that sense, when you are contrarian, when you can acknowledge that, I don't know, Biden or Mitch McConnell did something right, you have to find the reasons why isn't it right, and then you're going to search for those reasons. And if someone is sharing stories about Ukraine being Nazis, or sharing stories about Ukraine being gay, Ukraine being pro-LGBT or something like that, if you don't like that thing, it doesn't matter, then you will happily consume that, because because you need to be against it. It cannot be for mainstream. The second part of it is, and I think it's one of the most important parts, is there's a genocide going on in Ukraine, and it's hard to resist this. It's hard to oppose this idea that there is a genocide going in Ukraine. People are being deported, children are being kidnapped, Ukrainians are being forbidden to speak Ukrainian on the occupied territories. It's the legal definition of a genocide. And Timothy Snyder is the great historian, probably the greatest historian in the West, who's talking about Ukraine. And if you haven't listened, you should listen. He had a lecture recently. I don't remember which one. And he said a very interesting thing, that if there is a genocide somewhere in the world and you acknowledge that there is a genocide, then you have to do something about it. And people resist acknowledging that there is a genocide, just not to do something, not to invest in it, because it's uncomfortable. If the girl was raped in the park at 10 p.m., one thing you could do is to do something about it, to press the police, to do the rally, to do something, to do the I don't know, to ask neighbors to go and patrol the streets at night, etc., etc. All those things are hard to do. You can help this girl or something. All those things are hard to do, and they take investment from you, emotional as well. And otherwise, you could just think that this girl were I don't know, Nazi. It was a Nazi girl. She deserved it. Then that's fine. And then any conspiracy theory about this girl will work if you just don't want to do anything about it.
Yeah. That's my personal experience as well. I know that some time ago I wrote this thread about, my experience of surviving rape, and then how I feel exactly kind of the same when some people talk to me about Ukraine these days, that for them it's easier to deny whatever I say, and then it's easier to kind of, point out that maybe this is all happening in my head, or I'm the one to blame, than to address the fact that they're not comfortable with the situation, but most importantly, they are not ready to do anything about it. So they're doing it for themselves to kind of conceal conceal their inability or lack of desire to act. So this is indeed a great point. But you also mentioned just now these famous Western far right people like Tucker Carlson and Jordan Peterson, and how they, to their audience of millions, how they parroting Russian propaganda narratives about us, about Ukraine and Ukrainians. So do you think it's because Russian colonialism has been marketed in such a good way over these decades that these bizarre narratives do not seem very off for a Westerner? Or is it because of recent influx of Russian money, that corrupted a lot of Western politics, including in America? So what do you think it's like at play more in this situation? Why those narratives are being picked up?
Yeah, well, you're a Ukrainian, and all of Ukrainians who are in the spaces right now know for sure, and have long expertise and long experience with Russian corruption, and everyone knows that if something or someone, it looks like a Russian asset, or speaks like a Russian asset, or does things Russian assets do, probably because it is a Russian asset, and then in years, sometimes in decades, it appears yet, well, yeah, he got some Russian money somewhere, and which is why I'm surprised there, or maybe there are, but if you're, I don't know, Western investigative journalist, or if you're Department of Justice or something like that, if you hear Tucker Carlson, for instance, like not just parroting, he's literally spreading the Russian propaganda word by word, or even worse, because it sounds worse than what Russian propaganda is originally, because even they don't go that far in line. You probably would want to look into what's going on there, and I'm just saying, because it's it might sound a little bit, I don't know, sketchy, but this is what it is. If someone is doing things which Russia wants, and it's probably because there's some influence. But otherwise, I think some of them, most of those people, apart from Tucker Carlson, I don't believe they have this Russian, direct Russian influence, corrupt influence. Probably, first of all, they play on this contrarian sentiment. And about the contrarian sentiment, I heard in March or April, I was listening to the podcast Pod Save America or 558 or NPR, I don't remember which one exactly, but the journalist on this podcast said very interesting thing, which actually shocked me. He said that when you travel around the United States, in places where you see the Confederate flags, you probably won't see the Black Lives Matter flags, and vice versa. You won't see the Confederate flags in the places where you see Black Lives Matter flags. But at that time, in spring 2022, you could see Ukrainian flags everywhere. And it meant that the support for Ukraine was a uniting topic, first in decades in the United States, in US politics, which is polarized to the edge right now. You could see the something which unites people, Ukrainian struggle for freedom. And those people who built their political careers or media careers, those people just could not benefit from it. So they had to come up with something else to split it apart once again. And of course, yeah, Russian colonialism. You mentioned Jordan Peterson. Well, in most of these guys, if you listen to them carefully, they actually do support lots of ideas which Vladimir Putin promotes himself. It sometimes feels that, yeah, well, it sometimes feels like Vladimir Putin's speech writers actually listen to Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, I don't know, Steven Crowder, etc., and then write the speeches for Putin to push these topics to feed the narrative, the anti-left narrative, anti-LGBT narrative, etc., and those people will take this gratefully and use it for their for building of their contrarian view of what the war is.
But maybe it's just because pure fascism, and it's the same everywhere.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that it's because they are fascist. Then we would have to end this podcast sooner than later. Yeah, that's because they're fascist and they love fascism and they support fascism. And Russia is a fascist state, Putin is a fascist, and they're like, yeah, fascism is cool. By the way, we made a video about the anti-LGBT propaganda in Russia, anti-LGBT laws in Russia. And it was the first time we got the comments on the YouTube video, and I don't believe it were bots. First, like the whole clip was about like, look, Russia forbids LGBT propaganda by law. You cannot say gay in Russia. You cannot show gay people in the TV in Russia by law. You could be arrested for being gay. You could be tortured for being gay in Chechnya without any court or anything. There's anti-LGBT propaganda which says that like this is unhealthy, etc., etc. And we were like saying, look at this. This is fascist country, and lots of comments we got, and it was like, I don't know, 20% of comments were like, yeah, what's wrong about it? They're right. And it's like, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. If you turn on like Steven Crowder or something, you'll probably hear the same shit.
Yeah, no, it's I was also just looking. I don't know if you definitely have, and I was gonna say we can't not talk about a lot of these topics without talking about the man that owns the platform that we're on right now. I've actually I set up my tweet deck in a way that I see like all the basically I start my day by seeing like all the top tweets, like above 5,000 retweets that mention either Russia or Ukraine, and it's actually really depressing. Like, it's most of the time the stuff that gets retweeted a lot, and I don't know why, and my question to you will be why, but a lot of it is exactly from some of these characters that you've been talking about. Sometimes it's random characters that, speak similar things and you propagate similar ideas. And I was just wondering, do you think that there's something like specific about Twitter that makes people behave in this way and ideas like that to spread, or like what's wrong with people on Twitter basically?
Yeah, I noticed that probably in spring, first couple of months in spring, if you open the I don't know CNN article, New York Times article, if you open the tweet of CNN or New York Times about Ukraine, you would probably get the support and comments for Ukraine, and it changed very quickly, very rapidly. Changed to if you open any news right now, just go to the New York Times Twitter account and open any tweet with the topic about Ukraine, you will get like tens of comments which say Ukrainians are Nazi or something like that. And well, first thing I would think, I hope so, those are bots because Russia is known for bot operations, and they do it really, really good. Um, and yeah, and second, I think the propaganda Tucker Carlson and people like him doing online, Donald Donald Trump Jr., for instance, yeah, we forgot to mention him, are doing online is working as well. And people who are subjected to these views and who see news, CNN or New York Times articles online, they go and comment their nasty things. And the last thing which shocked me was the comments about Zelensky's outfit when he visited the United States.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so it's yeah, but and we are shocked about this, but some of journalists or people from the United States might remember that in 2015 or 14, the biggest scandal in the United States was that Barack Obama wore the tan suit on some evening. I don't remember which one, but instead of black suit. And
Yeah.
it's not that surprising. We just got into the mid grinder of United States politics, and we are the regular topic now, not like it was in spring.
Well, it's still fascinating. I mean, that's fascinating. I just love that Ukrainians and Ukrainian journalists, but just regular Ukrainians are so educated on all these intricacies of, local politics in the States or in Europe or in Germany. Of course, because this is not by our choice, because we do depend on world solidarity, but also because in general, this is such a bizarre sight for even Ukrainians to see, such a messed up, chaotic, and absolutely system that doesn't work. But I love that you brought to the our attention the topic of Western and foreign journalists, but specifically Western and American and Western European journalism that covers Ukraine. Um, we probably are right to admit that a lot of conspiracy theories or a lot of disinformation that was produced by Russia and then spread around the world that targets Ukraine are time to time being picked up by journalists themselves, especially in the West. So they, channel all this nonsense, either about, Russian language in Ukraine or Russian identity, paint us our identities through Russian colonialism lens. That happens like every basically Tuesday. I don't know. This is not something shocking. But my question to you, why do you think that for your Western colleagues, it is so easy to pick up, even incidentally, to pick up a Russian propaganda narrative and insert it in their reporting? Do you think is just because they also harbor some of the similar views about Ukrainians in general, like, for example, we're not equal enough? Or do you think this is just, the state of journalism and lazy journalism in many newsrooms in the West, that they just don't want to educate themselves and check the facts and talk to Ukrainians, at least?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, we should acknowledge that the the reporting of this war by Western, but by the mainstream media, and we say like New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, BBC, etc., was actually quite good. I mean, like relatively good if you can compare it to 2014, or if you compare it to the coverage of war in Georgia in 2008. It was great. It's just you can say that said, it's not good enough because like this war and Americans could or Europeans could often see Ukrainians outraged because of the Western media, etc., and they get offended. We were helping you, and you're outraged. This war is so important. The importance of this event is so important. This is, first of all, genocide committed in center of Europe. This is most important war for democracy and freedom around the world in decades, probably since 1945, and it is so important. And yet we see the journalists, we see the media doing not merely enough to ensure the good reporting, ensure what's the good editorial work. And the examples are really frightening. For instance, recently we had this thing in Ukraine when I'm not sure if Zelensky sanctioned the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy. But also, those of you who don't know, Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy is basically the branch of Russian secret services. It's not even church. It's just a place where people are told who to vote for, what to be feared for, etc., but for working for the Russians. I know that churches, all of them are like that, but this one was working for the people who tried to commit a genocide, and they were propagating the genocide in their churches in Ukraine during the war. There are even some reports that they were preparing the separatists, so-called, were preparing in those churches. Anyway, the New York Times report about this sanctioning of Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy comes out and says something like, well, the church is being closed, like TLDR. And a little bit, there was one just somewhere in the end that, yeah, someone considered this church to be too much affiliated with Moscow, blah, 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 but nothing specific. And like the most, this article looks like just, yeah, Ukrainians are closing the church. And then Tucker Carlson goes on TV and says things like, we are supporting the fascists. We are supporting those who closed the church. They just closed the church. Zelensky closed the church. And Republicans are most of the Republicans are Christians, and when they hear things like that, someone closes the church, they probably got frustrated. And Tucker Carlson viewers are not just like far right crazy people. Those are all also like center right people who probably watch Tucker Carlson and probably read some Wall Street Journal, etc.
But I think it was also important dynamic there that because Zelensky is a Jewish leader and Jewish Ukrainian leader, and for those people, just the whole kind of topic of possibly a Jewish president closed down a Christian church is something too easy. and not too easy not to pick up.
Conspiracy theories, basically.
Yeah. And also he was dancing in heels, in top heels, without a top. So yeah, you can add this video for people to watch. But yeah, and then this religious Catholic or Protestant, he reads this New York Times article, and he's like, oh yeah, even New York Times says what Tucker Carlson just said, then it makes sense. And then he don't want to support Ukraine anymore. And then Democrats are afraid to push more money for Ukraine or tanks or ATACMS. And then thousands more of Ukrainians will die, or like territories won't be deoccupied, and most more Ukrainians will suffer. And it's like those like editors of New York Times who allowed this person to write this topic, who didn't know or didn't want to share things like the knowledge about what's going on. Those people are probably responsible for some Ukrainian death. They should know this. They should understand this. And another story I wanted to remind you is the story of Olenivka, the horrible story where Russians blew up 60, probably, I don't remember the exact number, of Ukrainian prisoners of war from Azovstal. They blew up them while they were sleeping in the prison, and said that it was a Ukrainian HIMARS strike. And immediately, Western media, CNN, New York Times, and I don't remember who else, wrote in articles that, well, there was the Ukrainian prisoners of war blew up. Sides blame each other, and probably was HIMARS. We don't know yet, etc. And immediately, people with knowledge, with expertise on Twitter, immediately showed that this is not HIMARS strike. It doesn't look like a HIMARS strike. HIMARS strikes don't look like that. They demolished the building completely. This building were just on fire from the inside. And it was obvious, it's obvious. It's not like when you report things, there are two sides, like Ukrainians saying this, Russians saying this, and who's right, we don't know. It just doesn't work like that. Russians are lying 100% of the time. Ukrainians are not that, I don't know. I don't remember Ukrainians lying too much during this war, or misleading too much. And the editorials should bear responsibility for this. Those are the institutions people are counting on for the expertise. Those are institutions where people which have the resources to have journalists in every country, which have resources to hire Ukrainians to work, actual Ukrainians not as fixers but as journalists to work to tell the truth.
We've spoken about this as well before. Like, I think there's, and I obviously don't mean this about everyone, but I think sometimes there's also this, like, I don't know, Western arrogance in some of these circles around, like, almost like we know better how to explain a certain topic than people who actually know what they're talking about. Like the example you gave about the church, especially, like, yes, technically it's called the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarch, whatever it's called, but in theory it's just like Russia's continuation of Russia's church. So it doesn't, like, you just, I feel like people just get so confused in all these, like, theoretical terms and concepts, and adding to that, like, a level of arrogance about knowing more is causes a lot of these problems. But you're totally right. I agree, they have to be in a way also held accountable for that stuff. Mark, I'm going to bring in Tatiana, who does our audience engagement, because we have a question for you from our patron and a few other comments as well. So Tatiana, please go ahead.
Hi, Mark. I'm going to start. First of all, this is a super engaged episode, and I have been absolutely fascinated listening to it. So thank you, Mark, for taking the time. I think a lot of people are just really jazzed about what you have to say, and I think it's, like, really compelling. I'm going to start with comments on Twitter. So Logan says, people who judge so shallowly to form an opinion on appearance have already formed their opinions without evidence and are just looking for a trivial confirmation to assert their preconceived notion. Isn't that the truth? I have two comments from the Daily News Summary. Firstly, they say Mir для України, so дякую вам. That means peace for Ukraine. And he also mentions that he thinks Tucker Carlson, жахлива людина, which means he's a horrible person. I think a lot of people can agree on that one. Also, he said most of the journalists that cover pro-Russian propaganda are lazy, biased, and uninformed. Now, I will go to, hang on a minute, let me switch screens here. So I have a comment actually from one of our patrons, a very supportive patron named, her handle is, it's Margaret to you. She says, as a queer person, my heart beats faster, not in a good way, to hear of all the homophobic propaganda and wrong stories on Ukraine by the right-wing media and politicians in the West and Russia. This, among many other reasons, is another clear indication why qualitative, independent journalism is so important and why Russian colonialism needs to end. Thank you, Margaret. That was really important, and I'm glad you spoke up. And then I actually wanted to share, we have so many supportive patrons, and those of you who do not follow our Patreon, please maybe think about doing so. It's just amazing the kind of responses that we get from people that share personal stories. They send us messages of support, and we had two recent ones. One of them is from a woman named Barbara, and she says, I'm really grateful for all the effort you have put in to create such a kick-ass podcast. I felt really lost this year, and Ukrainian Spaces has given me that sense of community I really needed. Each week, I look forward to your episodes, always so informative and inspiring. Ukrainian Spaces help me rediscover what it means to be Ukrainian. Thank you for all that you do. And that's really wonderful. And, you know, we wouldn't be here without the patrons, but also with our incredible guests who, you know, take the time out to join us. Also, there's one more that I'd like to share. And this is from a patron. I don't want to reveal her name because she hasn't consented for me to do so. So I'm going to just say that she is a patron that has been around since October, and we really appreciate her. She says, your podcast has been instrumental for uncovering aspects of my Ukrainian identity that were hidden under layers of pain, loss, and silence. Thank you so much. I am 54. I was raised in a vibrant, lively Ukrainian community in Canada. I have visited Ukraine and have friends and relatives there, but post-independence, I got really frustrated through the 90s with the constant cycles of reform, and then I lost my language, my culture, and my faith in the Ukrainian people. But I realize I'm finding it again. More importantly, I'm realizing how much I had bought into mainstream narratives about my own ancestral land. I realize now that I had begun to discriminate against myself, my culture, and my heritage. You have helped me come back to my community, and you have helped me uncover my own Ukrainian soul. I'm forever grateful for all of these voices. The Ukrainian community is vast, strong, and global. We share one heart, and we will win. The future will be with you, our youngest warriors. Which is, I mean, my God, that almost made me cry. It's an incredible message. So thank you to that patron.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Indeed, powerful words. Valeria, maybe you had a question to Mark as well, and unfortunately we'll have to wrap up soon. So I think it's a perfect timing for our favorite question.
Our favorite question, Mark, to you is a little bit about your understanding of your own Ukrainian identity. So yeah, we always ask everyone at the end, what does it mean to you to be Ukrainian, and has that understanding for you changed at all since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in February?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Well, you know, like we often feel like we're the most important people in the world, and like we're the most important nation in the world, etc., etc. And most of people feel like that. And in case of Ukrainians right now in this year, it was the truth, and I think Ukrainians acknowledged it for the first time, for the first time, and people around the world did not. Most of people around the world did not yet acknowledge this, but Ukrainian nation, Ukrainian people are the most important right now for the future of the democracy and the future of the like normal living in the world. And it's I don't know, maybe it's a funny thing to say, but it is true that what we are fighting for since 2013, the fight we are fighting for, the result of this fight will show the world that the fight for democracy could be successful, that the fight for freedom could be successful. And if people in the West think that their freedom is forever and their democracy is forever, last couple of years shown that this is not true. Who could have thought that Hungary could be an authoritarian state, I don't know, 15 years ago? Who could have thought that there could be a coup attempt in the United States? Nobody. And I don't know, maybe in a year, 2 years, 5 years, people in the West, in France, in Hungary, in the United States, somewhere around the world will have to fight tyranny. And if the fight against tyranny will fail now, they won't have anything to fight for. And if it prevails, then the tyranny will be weakened. And this is like when Zelensky in his speeches say this is a fight for the whole free world. It's not just some words. It is actually true. And this is how most of Ukrainians feel like, and this is how I definitely feel like since the start of this war.
Thank you, Mark. This very powerful and important words, and I am thankful for you to show up. You're showing up every day, and you do your work, and you try to make a sense of the coverage of Ukraine, and you try to explain Ukraine, and you try to make it funny and make jokes about it, despite all the horrors that we witness every day, and that takes real stamina. And thank you for doing that important job. And I think it's quintessential Ukrainian as well to take everything with a bit of humor. And our humor is our resilience to all the horrible stuff that we're witnessing. But also, I think you're encapsulating what journalism could be, not only in Ukraine, but elsewhere in the West or abroad. A journalism that is responsible, a journalist that actually thinks about the consequences of your work. If you circulate something or if you share something, you think in advance what kind of consequences I bring into the world by doing so. And I think this is something that unfortunately has been missing in a lot of Western coverage of Ukraine recently. So thank you so much for being true, no bullshit, pointing it out to our colleagues in the West when they do something wrong and when they cover our lives and our country in not in the right way. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for doing this. Your podcast is amazing, and what you're doing is amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maksym and Valeria, and thank you for having me. I had, I would not say fun, but I was pleased to to speak my mind. Thank you very much.
And we loved listening. So thank you for coming.
Yep, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you so much to Valeria, Tatiana, and Solomia as well for making sure that this episode is a great episode, as all of our episodes, to be honest. But if you listening us already as a podcast, as a recorded version, please do not forget that rating and leaving comments is extremely important for us to keep trending on podcast platforms as well. We're now present on more than 8 podcast platforms. My favorite one is our recent YouTube channel where we also upload podcasts. I know might be a very Ukrainian thing to do, but I just love how it feels and how it looks. So check it out that as well. You can actually check all the podcast available platforms on our website, ukrainianspaces.com. And thank you a lot to our Patreon sponsors, because Ukrainian Spaces remains 100% independent, listener supported, and without your help and without your constant support, this show wouldn't be possible, and we couldn't amplify and feature as many diverse Ukrainian voices and decolonize as many Ukrainian topics as we've done in recent 10 months. So hopefully you will stay with us for next season. You bring more your friends to support us. Great thanks to our Patreon family as well. I think I haven't forgotten anything.
Except asking for subscribing to Ukrainian Toronto television.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Subscribe to Mark and to Ukrainian Toronto television.
One last thing is traditional. Slava Ukraini.
Heroям slava. And see you next time.
Bye, guys.